welcome to our info session, our question time. We've just launched literally 2 minutes ago, we've just launched our Spring 2026 funding round. Woohoo! Spring seems a long way off, I know, but light's coming. So a quick intro to myself. So I am the head of programs and impact. My name is Eda. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Kelly Ruder, as well as one of our wonderful senior applicant consultants, Roz Kirkland, who hopefully will be able to answer some of your questions and give insights into how the applications are reviewed. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. I'll get Roz to introduce herself in a bit, but I'm just first going to talk very quickly, high level, about the Fore and about our funding process. But hopefully you're all somewhat familiar, and also it's online, so it'll just be a quick overview. So as most of you know, the Fore, we're the UK's only venture philanthropy fund. Our goal is to back small charities and social enterprises. To date, we've given over 600 grants and almost £12 million. And we don't just do funding, we support partners with strategic support. That's through courses, workshops, pro bono networks. And the other thing that makes us special is that we're determined to give feedback to all those who are invited to apply. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the process. But we try to give bespoke feedback. How far you get in the application process determines how much feedback you get. But we do try to give something constructive to everyone. In terms of the process, so yes, we just opened our registration for interest for 2026 spring round. And that's open for 1 week. So it's opened 4 minutes ago now and will be opened until midday next week, 3rd of December. It's super short. It takes 2 to 3 minutes, very simple questions. It's just to register your interest. Just to note, it's not the actual application. So once you've registered your interest, after the week is finished, mid next week, we'll then invite some of you to apply to submit an application. That application is 3 pages long. And it's not so much, there's no kind of formatted application. It's really just, we ask you to answer some questions that we've listed on our website, which you can already see. We ask you to answer those in whatever format you find easiest, as long as it doesn't go over 3 pages. And we'll give you about 5 weeks from kind of inviting you to apply to then submitting it so you can really get your teeth into it. But we really don't want you guys to spend ages on it. We know you're super busy. So please use existing applications, past applications, existing text you have. It's not an essay writing competition. It's really just to communicate your story and communicate what the funding would mean. And actually that application will change quite a bit through the process if it kind of progresses through the different rounds anyway, which hopefully Roz can give you some insight on. But yeah, it's really important that there's not too much kind of focusing on how like well written it is, essentially. Just to loop back, the eligibility generally for the fund is online again, and there is an eligibility quiz which you can find there. But the main things are that you need to be a registered charity, community interest company limited by guarantee, or community benefit society. And your annual revenue should be less than 500k. Otherwise, it's very broad in terms of cause. The main things that we want to see in terms of the application are that you demonstrate strong leadership, and we can talk a bit about what that is, and that you demonstrate how the grant would unlock transformational change on the organization, and that's really important. So it's a focus on transforming the organization rather than the beneficiaries. We all know you do amazing work, and it's super competitive, and so the Fore is really distinguished by giving grants and funding to organizations at this stage of kind of unlocking a step change. Let me just make sure I've read anything. The other thing we look for is strength of leadership. So as I've mentioned, and for this one, it can be in many different ways: lived experience, the skills, the expertise, kind of the vision. I guess the main thing to reassure you on is that we understand that a lot of you are small charities, and that's the point, and that the Fore does have a high risk tolerance. I think what's important is just making sure that any kind of constraints or challenges are addressed, and kind of showing that, oh, this is how the funding would help, or how the funding would help reach that potential and overcome those challenges. So in terms of the stages, so the first stage, as I said, is kind of registering your interest, and then you're invited to apply. After you've submitted your applications, we have strategic applicant consultants like Roz, who then review the applications and shortlist them to the top 30%. And our consultants have a range of experience. So we'll hear from Roz what hers is, but we'll also, it could be a different type of experience that you get. But it's always really handy to just have someone, whether it's in this stage or the following stage, it's just handy to have someone have kind of that fresh perspective. So in this stage, for those who aren't successful, they are given some bespoke written feedback. And in the second stage, what happens is, so the top 30% are taken through, they have about a 45-minute or 1 hour call with the consultant. And again, that tends to be to kind of flesh out a bit more, to understand what the proposal is, see kind of the validity, like the strength of it. And then, but also, as I said, sometimes helpful just to have a sounding board from a fresh perspective. And they'll get bespoke feedback through a call. Anyone who's unsuccessful and those that are successful will be invited, will be taken through to panel, and kind of your proposal will be worked on together with the consultant. That's kind of the high level whistle stop tour of the process and the Fore. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for your questions. So before we do that, I'll just open it up to Roz. Thank you for joining. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit and talk a bit about your background and maybe what you enjoy about being an SAC?
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Roz, and I've been a strategic applicant consultant with the Fore for about a year now. Prior to that, my background is mainly in the non-profit sector, so principally working in the international development and humanitarian world. I've worked for large organisations. I've also worked for small startup organisations that start around the kitchen table. And I've also worked for a dynamic social enterprise. I also volunteer locally for a community cafe. I'm a mentor on a leadership programme. And I think that's about it in terms of introducing myself. Why I like being a strategic applicant consultant and why I like the Fore is because the Fore supports small organisations. And having worked for small organisations, I know how hard it can be to access funding. The other thing I really like is that the Fore's funding is unrestricted. It allows you to put forward a proposal for that project that's going to really deliver change for your organisation. And what I really enjoy is getting to work with a number of organisations, finding out lots of innovative solutions that people are putting forward. It's really motivating. For those organisations who get through the first few stages, I also really enjoy working with you to fine-tune ideas and develop that final, what's called panel report, which is ultimately taken to a panel of decision makers who will ultimately decide what gets funded. The other thing I like about the Fore is there is a very rigorous but fair and transparent assessment process. And as Eda mentioned, everybody gets feedback. And again, having sat on the other side of the fence writing applications, I just think that's so important. So that's what I like about working for the Fore.
Thanks, Roz. Sorry, I struggled with my unmute button there. And then I feel like one question that will definitely come up is, we talk a lot about about transformational change, which can be so subjective. So wondering, just from your experience, what does that look like? What do you look for when you go through applications?
So I think the transformational impact, it's really about realizing a really significant change for your organization. It's not about funding business as usual activities. It's a real opportunity to put that innovative project forward. It's sort of the organizational development project. And I think the important things to think about are, what is this going to do in terms of your scale? What will it mean for your sustainability or your financial resilience? Is it going to address a capacity or a skills gap? What will it do for your impact or efficiency? Have you piloted something that you think, oh, we just need the funding to take that to the next stage? It's all those sorts of things that are going to bring about a proper transformational change for your organization. And it's really important to set the context of your organization so that as somebody who reads those applications, you can really see the journey and what that transformational change is going to be.
Thanks, Roz. I'll now open it up to questions. I've seen there's quite a few in the chat, so I'll try and catch up with those. But feel free to put your hand up, chuck a question in the chat, or just unmute yourself. I saw one. How do you decide who to invite to apply? That's by random selection. So it's just to acknowledge that we only invite, the number of people we invite to apply is directly determined by how many grants we can offer. And so it's really just a case of managing capacity to make sure we give feedback to everyone who takes the time to submit their 3-page application, but also to make sure that we're not inviting too many people to spend their time on something when the odds are just too much. So it's really random selection determined by how many grants we can offer. And that's reminded me that, one thing that we also need in the application alongside the 3 pages is 3 years of past finances, like historical finances, as well as 3-year forecast of how you expect finances to look, with the assumption that you get the funding, so you can really demonstrate that transformational change.
And Eda, sorry, just to jump in there, and we do provide a template to help you present those finances as well. So it's in the form of a table in an Excel spreadsheet, and this can also be found on our website.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think there's a related question. How do you view startups without a full year of accounts yet? I'm relatively new, but I think that's not so common. But maybe Kelly or Roz, I don't know if you've had that experience, and how would it be considered?
Yeah, so I guess just from sort of a practical sort of eligibility perspective, it's absolutely fine if you don't have any sort of filed accounts just yet. We often get many applicants who have just recently been set up as a charity or so on. So from that perspective, it's absolutely fine. But I think it'd be really interesting to hear from Roz about what her experience might be in that sense as well.
I would say that small startups are definitely welcome, because often there are some fantastic ideas out there. So definitely consider applying.
And I guess just to add to that, I think what is more focused on then is the forecast and kind of really telling that story. So obviously just kind of weaving that narrative to show like where you've been and what you're planning. I can see there's a question from Den Boba. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Do we have to resend notes after this? I submitted my notes of interest a week ago. I'm not sure what that's referencing, but just to clarify that the registration for interest is a set form that's only opened today at 12. So it's worth maybe just rechecking that online, or I think we're also posting it on our LinkedIn this afternoon. But definitely make sure you've submitted the form through that link. Anyone with their hand up or want to jump in? Avinash, is that how you pronounce your name?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to ask, I've just recently joined our charity, and it doesn't have filed accounts, but also because we're a very small charity, although it's been going for some time, it's that thing about because transform. We've had somebody who's been the head for a long time, but this thing about transformational change. What size of change? Because although we are small, we do various bits and pieces. It's what are the kind of things that you're looking for us to develop into that would make that a transformational change. Because again, because we're small, it's very hard, because with transformation you usually think major changes in sort of largest organizations, or that you're going to transform into something else, rather than we're really keeping to our core. It's just how we maybe develop the base or just increase the size of the community we serve. Although I know it's more to do with the organization rather than beneficiaries, but for us that's closely linked together.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Ros, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yes, I can try and answer that. So I think the important thing to hold on to is we are looking at this within the context of your organisation. So what might be a big change for another organisation might not be for you, and vice versa. So I think it's about you in the application telling your story, because you're being assessed just on your merits, and things that we might be looking for are, will this request affect the scale of what you do? Does this help you be more sustainable? Will this enable you to reach more beneficiaries because you free up capacity of a senior person in the organisation to focus on strategy by backfilling a position? Will what you're requesting make you more efficient? It's those sorts of things that are being looked at, but within the context of your organisation. So I hope that helps answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely does help, because our main thing is, again, the chief exec, the CEO is the one person that's doing a lot of stuff, and we want to release that person a bit more. But it's just how it would be useful to know how other organizations have done that to help the smaller charities to achieve, one, the funding, but also to get that extra scale. But thank you.
Thank you both. I think we had Mboba next.
I think when this answer is given already, my question has been answered. So that's a great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure who was next. Mayor, is that how you pronounce your name? Oh, you're on mute, unless.
Is that better? Hello.
Yes.
Hi. I've got a question. We're a small organisation, arts organisation in West Wales. 2 years ago, we partnered the County Council on a project where we received a significant amount of money, but that was to commission artists on a sculpture trail. So that was a lot of money that came in and then immediately went out to artists. What that's meant, though, is that it's tipped us over kind of in the revenue we had that year. It's kind of is completely out of kilter with what we usually get. And you just mentioned a 3-year account, so I was wondering, it might be Kelly who knows the answer to this, but if there's a way that we can kind of qualify the figures that we give through there.
Yeah, so I would say if your income has been above 500k in previous years, like within those 3 years, that is fine. I guess in terms of eligibility, it's more so your last completed financial year, so your last filed accounts that we would look at. So I'm afraid if that's above 500k, then you currently wouldn't be eligible, but if it's below, then you would be. So just focusing on that last financial year.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
No worries.
Thanks both. Andrew?
I've asked the question in the chat, and Paul Connor has also asked the same. You talked about a maximum size. What about a minimum size charity? And also, when Ros was speaking, she was talking about backfilling a senior person. Well, we don't employ anybody. If we're to say we'd use the money to bring somebody in as a sort of freelance whatever, would that count? Because we can't backfill because we haven't got anybody to backfill.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll hand over to Ros to speak about her experience, but just to clarify, there's no minimum threshold for kind of your income. And also some applications are requesting funds to hire their first time staff. So there's like you said, they don't have anyone, but equally, it doesn't have to be about hiring anyone if you want to stay volunteer-led. For example, it could be a CRM system or any other kind of process system. Ros, what have you seen, I guess, in the past?
So definitely seen applications where organisations do want to bring somebody in, but equally, as you've just said, also for CRM systems. So all sorts of things like that. If that is going to give you the capacity you need in order to take your organisation to the next level, all of that is absolutely acceptable.
What's CRM?
Sorry, yes. Go on, Ros.
Corporate responsibility. So some people want to put in databases and things like that just to help manage partnerships, relationships that they might have.
So I think client relationship management.
Yes, yeah. Client relationship management.
Yeah. So yeah, a system to track who you've talked to, any leads, but basically just any kind of system or process that you pay for. It could be a project management system, something that's relevant to your work, but essentially it's not always people.
Oh gosh, that sounds very complicated. Righty-ho. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just go through some of the questions. Do you fund for the refurbishment of buildings to make them available for community use? The answer would be yes, as long as there's that transformational impact. Ros, I don't know if you've had any experience with those kinds of applications.
Personally, I haven't. No, what I would say is it's hard if the Fore is only going to be part funding a refurbishment of a building, because the Fore likes to see sort of the entirety of what it's going to do. So I guess if there was something very discrete that was an entire package within a refurbishment, that would be fine. But if it was just potentially going to be co-funding and the other part of the funding hadn't been realised, then that I think would probably be seen as too high risk. But Kelly, I don't know, you may have another view on that, having seen lots of applications as well.
No, I think what you've just said is spot on, Ros. I guess because we're keen to see the transformational impact of our grant in particular, when it is part of sort of a larger project such as a capital project, it can be difficult to pin down the specific transformation of our funding. So that's not to say we wouldn't fund that, but that's just one thing to bear in mind and potentially drill down on in your application.
Thanks both. In terms of Alda's question, do you have any priority or support applications for new organizations? Many feel discouraged during the process as they are often rejected for not having a financial history. So we've spoken about how there's no prerequisite for having financial history. I guess one thing I would say in response to, well, I guess the short answer is no, we don't kind of give priority as such, but I would say that the process really levels the playing field. And especially as that there's feedback given, and especially if you progress to stage 2, it's more in-depth feedback that can really help you strengthen it. And I think many of the organizations that do receive funding will have applied once or twice, gotten the feedback, and then come back having incorporated that feedback and come back stronger and then gotten the funding. So yeah, I think the process is very much made to help those smaller organizations, but we don't kind of do specific prioritization for them. So Martin asked, does geography location come into your decision making? It doesn't. There's some rounds, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but some rounds in the summer that might be geography focused, but for the spring round, it's national, so there's no kind of quota or anything like that.
Yeah.
Keith?
Yeah, hi, it's just related to the question. I put the question about the refurbishment of the building. So we run a company called Birmingham Community Boxing Project. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Yeah, good. And we've identified a council building, potential community asset transfer. So the councillors are looking at it now, and we're in the process of seeing if it's a feasible option. So that was a question, basically, if we got that as a community asset transfer, would the Fore fund the refurbishment of that building? Just as yourself, basically, with no one else included.
Ross, do you want to take that one?
Yes. So I think it would be important in your proposal to have a think about the value of the grant. So as you'll have seen from the website, the Fore gives grants of up to 45,000. So if what you're proposing is within that, and if you can then describe by having that as an asset what it's going to do for the organisation, then absolutely, I don't see a problem in that being put forward.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's the main thing. That would get us on the next step in the company, basically.
And I think it's really about telling the story of your organisation and what the Fore's contribution is going to be in that story in enabling you to do more, for want of a better word.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, like we're in the process at the moment, so if it is available for community asset transfer, as you know, Birmingham City Council are trying to offload a lot of buildings at the moment. So fingers crossed, we may get a chance to apply for that. So it may be further down the line, towards the end of next year. Would that necessarily be a problem?
So I think what might be important then is just to think about which funding round you consider putting your application into, because there are 3 per year. So this is for the spring. So Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the dates. Final decisions are taken in May for the spring round. And what are the dates for the summer funding round approximately?
Yep, so the funding decisions for the summer round will be made around the middle of July. And then for the autumn round, it's normally like end of November.
And is there any time limit on when you have to spend the funding by?
Yeah, so if you, for example, were to be awarded funding in our summer funding round in the July, we would ask that you sort of start the process of spending that funding, like sort of when you receive it, mainly because we will check in with you at yearly intervals just to see how things are going, if you come across any challenges, is there anything we can help with, that kind of thing. So it wouldn't necessarily be a situation where you could postpone spending it, if that makes sense, unless there was a real like need or reason to do so.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it would go towards equipment as well. And if we need to look at the building first and see if it needs refurbing so much, I think it looks in good condition from the outside, but we haven't been inside yet, so that'll be the next stage. We're trying to get a view in. But
And
yeah, that's answered my question. So thanks for that.
thanks, Keith. And just related to that is another question about minimum maximum that organizations can apply for. So it is £45,000 over 3 years, and you can choose how that comes in and kind of what the targets are measured against it. So for example, with you, Keith, you can acknowledge that the first year is kind of ramping up and getting ready, and it's a smaller payment, and then actually most of the work is in second year. So it's really up to you guys and what makes sense for your work and project. There's another question here. If an organization has had a volunteer CEO working outside of normal business hours and the project is to transform the organization by bringing this role in-house, is this something you would fund or at least part fund to allow for growth? My 2 cents on that would be in a way, yes, but I think while I guess paying additional hours for the CEO is transformational, there needs to be some sign of how that would be long-lasting transformational. So perhaps that would unlock something to make those extra hours sustainably paid for. Yeah, Roz, anything you want to add to that?
And I think just building on what you've said, it's often really good if you can show, for example, if the grant is going to be used to cover salaries, what happens when the Fore's funding is finished? How is that salary going to be covered? Is it because by paying that person, they're able to then focus a bit more on fundraising, bring in more income? So when the Fore's grant's finished, that income will then pick up the salary that's then that has been funded by the Fore. It's those sorts of things that help build the case.
Thanks, Roz. Just going to do one more question in the chat before I turn to you, Charlene. I hope that's how you
It was
pronounce
just that CEO question was mine. That was all.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So essentially, I founded this charity, and decided to start a charity while I was working, and as you do, you know. But where we're at, I feel like our charity at the moment is it's on a knife edge of I need to be in the charity to actually help it grow. So to be able to do that, what would you? I've launched or I am launching an income stream project, but I need to be in there to actually move that forward. But that will then be what funds the salaries going forward. So that's the transformational change. But it needs me in the seat during the day, not at home writing the strategies and doing the wages at 10 o'clock on a night, as opposed to being there 9 till 5. And I guess in previous years, so we've been going 5 years, we were a community group first and then a charity. So we're in our 6th year. But where I'm sort of going with it is if I've taken 3 weeks out of work and been in the charity for 3 weeks, the change that happens while I'm there during those 3 weeks, being available for people, being available for meetings, is transformational. And then it drops off again. And this thing, when I've sat and talked to my trustees now, there is a point there that actually we need a paid CEO sat in the seat, whether that be me or somebody else. We need somebody there driving the ship now, and not just tinkering around the edges as such. We need somebody there driving that. And I guess that's where the question comes from is, would you fund or part fund that to allow for that change to happen?
I would say yes. And I would also use the fact that your 3 weeks when you were there, you were able to get so much done as saying, you know, we've piloted this for 3 weeks. We know it works. This is what happened as a result of what we did in the 3 weeks. We now need to go to the next stage. We need somebody, you know, in a paid position to be able to take this forward.
100%. And I think really highlighting that it's unlocking a different type of income generation, which would make it self-sustaining. So yeah, that's definitely the kind of thing that would be eligible. I've got one question here. And your website says our goal is to get exceptional solutions from grassroots to nationwide impact. We are a small charity and will never be working outside, say, a 50-mile area. Is this fund not for us? It's a really good question. It is for you. So basically there should be a caveat to that, but basically we want to help those solutions get to nationwide impact if that's what they want and if it's suitable. So it's really just acknowledging that there's so many amazing innovative solutions that are at grassroots level and don't get shared, whether that's through influence, through franchising, through policy, or through scaling. There's lots of different ways you can get to nationwide. And so it could be that yours is really you just want to stay local and that's fine, or it could be that actually it's more applicable than you think it is to other areas in the UK, and we want to encourage that sharing and that cross pollination. But essentially it's still for you, yes. On the expression of interest form, there is a box for an address. Should I put in the registered business address or the delivery address, which is different? I want to say registered business address. Yes, Kelly's nodding, thank you. Would the fund be okay to use to cover rent costs of the building to facilitate a space? I think we've talked quite a bit about buildings, so I'm not sure if there was more to that you wanted answering, Khalifa, if you're there.
Yeah, I know we spoke about in terms of refurbishment, but this isn't refurbishment. This is I have a retail space in a shopping centre where I've surveyed over 50 young people and their families to find out how they felt comfortable in the shopping centre, a lot of which felt there was nothing for them. So Westfield have recently purchased the shopping centre and have actually refurbished units that now stand empty because a lot of traders can't afford them. But we were looking so we put on textile and social entrepreneurial projects once a week, but we can only do that depending on who has availability to hire a space. Whereas we have the team and a cohort number large enough that if we had a space to rent, we could put on these sessions 3 to 4 times a week. So I haven't seen many funding at the moment who are funding rent. A lot of them are funding project specific, like projects, not rent. So I know this is unrestricted, but I know basically my question is, if there was a space where you can rent it 15K a year, would that be seen as transformational because you're able to serve the community for more days across the week in a more sustainable way?
I think if, I mean, my first instinct, and Ros, you'll know better, my first instinct is there would have to be a clear narrative as to how that's more sustainable than how you're doing it now. But Ros, what's your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, I think the way you've described it just at the moment sounds like the impact would be directly for the beneficiaries. It sounds to me more of a sort of a beneficiary focused project rather than what I would call an organizational development project that's going to strengthen you as an organization. Now, that's not to say that what you're proposing isn't appropriate. It's just for this particular fund, which focuses on organizational development and the transformation for the organization. You would have to perhaps just think about how you would meet those criteria rather than just putting it in as a beneficiary focused project.
Okay, yeah, that's good to clarify. Thank you. So I do think probably at this stage, this fund might not be for us, but it's good to be on the call and hearing this because come next summer, I'll be well equipped and hopefully in a different position. But thank you so much.
Thanks both. Wary of time, there's a few more questions in the chat, but feel free to raise your hands. We have a succession plan following a strategic review, which involves the hire of a new centre manager. Would you consider this a transformational change? Because it is for us. I think similar to the past questions. In essence, mostly it's yes. It's really just telling that story of how it's transformational and how that transformation is sustained past the funding, essentially. On the application form, it asks for what our main charitable sectors are. We currently mostly operate with children and young people, but also support vulnerable women. And this is a sector where we wish to make chance and transform the work we do. This is currently third on the application form after health and well-being, so not reflective of our application. Should I change the order on the form to reflect this?
So I would say you can if you want to, but it's absolutely fine. It's basically just to give us just a brief snapshot of the kind of areas and sectors that you're working in. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Kelly. We have a close relationship with council, but we are a separate organisation with most trustees being councillors. Would this closed arrangement with the council hinder us? Can we still apply? We meet every other requirement. From my interpretation of that, there's no contradiction with any of the eligibility criteria if you are a separate entity, as long as that separate entity has annual income of under 500k. Yeah, Kelly, I don't know whether also, and Ros, like looking at the trustees and that would, and the links to the council would hinder in any other part of the process, but for me, no.
No, I don't think so. I guess as long as the sort of the registered charity sort of meets our eligibility criteria, that's all good from that perspective. But perhaps in the application itself, I would recommend just sort of explaining that relationship a bit more, just to give the strategic applicant consultant the full picture really of how you work with that council and the nature of that relationship as well. But yeah, that would be my sort of my instincts. But Ros, did you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you've answered that perfectly.
Thanks both. Another question, do all applications whether progress to the second stage or not will be given individual feedback? If you find the application lacking clarity, do you support those applicants to improve the application and resubmit it? Ros, do you want to talk about your experience with giving feedback?
Yes. So every organisation that's invited to submit the 3-page application as a minimum will get written feedback. Those that are then going to be taken through to the next stage then would have feedback in the form of a call. So as a minimum, everybody who applies gets written feedback, and if you go further down the process, then the feedback is provided through a call.
Thanks, Ros. I think those are all the questions in the chat, but give me a shout if I've missed any, and feel free to jump in. Wary of time, so I guess if there aren't further questions, just want to thank you all for joining, and Kelly and Roz for helping as well. One last, do you ever consider funding UK charities projects overseas? Yes, so they have to be registered in the UK, but the work doesn't actually have to be carried out in the UK. We've got some projects that we funded that are carried out in other countries, but it has to be registered in the UK. And I guess I just wanted to end on the note of sharing the kind of key dates, as well as, let me just share my screen. The key dates, but these you'll find online anyway. But we really just wanted to reiterate some of the common pitfalls that happen in applications, and some of these we've been repeating throughout the session, but some of them perhaps haven't come up yet. But it's really important that if you're invited to the application stage, some really, really simple but common mistakes is that some people don't stick to the 3-page maximum, and obviously it's harder for us and consultants to prioritize certain applications that give more information than others could. Make sure that you've answered all the questions on the website. So before submitting your application, I would just go back to the website and tick off the questions to make sure that they're all incorporated into the application. Again, focus on the transformational impact of the organization, not the beneficiaries. I think that's could be a tricky one for people because all of your work is about the beneficiaries. So it's a bit of a mindset change. And then tell the story, tell your story of how it would change, and really don't assume any knowledge. But again, that's something that the consultants will help you develop if you progress through. So don't worry too much about kind of the neatness of it. It's really just communicating the story. Thank you, everyone. Good luck, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.